Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Chinese Medicine Integral Collective. And we look forward to being back together again here. We're excited to see each other after taking the summer off and going further into intersubjective dialogues into healing and medicine and the nature of medicine. And so I'm just going to say a little bit about intersubjectivity and the kind of conversation we're having, and then Lorie Eve Dechar is going to introduce tonight's topic. So these are different kinds of discussions that we're having than just coming from, this is my opinion, this is what I know, this is what my teacher said, this is what I read in a book. Really what we're doing is, the ground of these discussions is acknowledging that what we're talking about tonight will be the role of intention in healing and medicine. We've done love, we've done the role of suffering in medicine. And there's a fundamental acknowledgement when we discuss these things that what love is, what intention is, their role in medicine is an ongoing inquiry and always will be. So rather than just stating where we've come to and what we think about it, or what some other authoritative source has said about it, the goal here is really to discuss whatever comes up directly from our own experience and to listen to each other and try to take what each person says further, to see what arises in us while the others are speaking, and to have a kind of living dialogue, a living investigation in real time, bringing all of who we are. Everything we know is certainly in the picture, but the emphasis is on going somewhere new together and really investigating and laying a deeper ground and being able to see through everybody else's eyes so that each perspective that's emerging is illuminating what we're talking about in a more whole form through an intelligence that's greater than any one of us could hold, and an emerging, when this is really flowing, our understanding, there should be an emergence of what we're talking about sort of four-dimensionally, as a sort of living presence, a living intelligence. And there should be a sense really ideally of that each of us is at our edge, pushing into the unknown and using our intuition to bring information in, bring information through now. So certainly everything we know is included, but the goal is to go beyond the known into something new. So with that perspective, Lorie, you can introduce tonight's topic and we'll take it away.
I'm not exactly sure how this topic arose. I think Lonnie, you and I were talking, and Alexander chimed in, and somehow this season, and it just felt like, okay, this arose as something to circle around. And so the topic that we're gonna sit with tonight or be with, what is the role of intention in the clinical space, in healing, in medicine? And as always, when you open this up, there's so much dimensionality, but I just want to toss into the circle as a kind of opening. I've been talking about intention for so long as the Yi spirit. It's been very much at the center when I think about the spirits of Chinese medicine. Yi, like the earth, is at the center. And so I toss into our question, earth, the Yi, the character. Maybe we can hold the character as a kind of guiding, organizing symbol. This character for Yi being the heart below, Shin, and then above a musical note. So for me, that's intention is the way that we sing the song of our hearts, that we sing the song of Shin out into the world so that it begins to vibrate out into the possibility of manifestation. Another way I think of this is that the Yi is that center point. Intention is the connecting link between above and below. The upper spirits bring down possibility, but the Yi is the psychic muscle, our intention that allows us to bring that into to the density, the work it takes, the muscularity it takes to bring an idea, a vision, and inspiration into life, into form in my life. So just kind of tossing that out, what does that look like in the clinical space? How does that inform our work as healers, the necessity for the ongoingness of the Yi, that the earth, it takes time, it takes faith and dedication. But then just as I was, suddenly I thought, well, what does it mean in our, where does it come from in our language? And so did that little looking into etymology and intendere from the Latin. And I love this. What it means is to stretch out, to extend, to turn one's attention and to stretch out. And there's a certain kind of effortfulness, even in the Latin, that it's a kind of a muscularity to it, a stretching out, extending ourselves. So I just threw those into the pool of our awareness here. The character, the Shin, this bowl with its spirit opening up as music that vibrates out into the world, and then this kind of stretching out of the self out into the world so that we actually begin to vibrate our radiance in such a way that it formalizes. So with that, I open the topic. How does this particular aspect of our being inform our practice?
That was beautiful, Lorie. Thank you. I think about from hearing your words, there's a prior to manifestation associated with it, that there's this subtle field associated with it, with this vibratory quality that we're bringing into manifestation. And I think it's also important to make the distinction that intention is not desire. It's not what we want, that it's so much more fundamental than that. It's what we are extended into the field of possibilities. And so there's this real investment. I'm all in here. This is all of me. This is my heart here, investing itself in this situation, in this moment, bringing it into possibility, but I am so not concerned with the outcome. Right. That I don't get involved in whether or not the patient's going to get better or improve or have symptoms go away or get a baby or whatever. That's a different topic altogether, but it's something more fundamental and powerful that I like, that musculature associated with it, that we're muscling it into being, just the total infusion.
when I think of intention, and I consider, as I've been contemplating this, knowing the call is coming up, I realize, I mean, in a way, like other things, but intention is the source, the path, and the goal. And it's present simultaneously from the deep intention. The deepest intention is to listen from and to heart, to recognize the patient's Buddha nature, to recognize them whole right here, right now, with their life exactly as it is, and listening from that within myself to that dimension in them, with the goal, however long it takes. It could be a second, or it could be lifetimes from now, but all treatment is done with that intention and holding that vision. And simultaneously, there's the simple intention in, where is my finger on the pulse, and what information is coming through here, and where am I placing the needle, and what expectation do I have when I put that needle in, of where the pulse will change and how it will change. So there are literally simultaneously, and I think these are all faces of the same one thing, moment to moment intentions that can shift in real-time interaction with people. And as I go through the ritual of the treatment with them, from the moment of greeting them to the moment they leave, and then holding all of that in a vision of the overall outcome, which is for them to at least get a couple of toes or a foot or a whole leg or two on the distant shore and be freed from suffering. Not just symptomatically freed, not just freed because acupuncture worked to take a symptom away, but to really awaken them to the source of self and to the dimension of the self, which is free. And so they're all of these are intention, but they're momentary to however long it takes in scale, but always holding the possible outcome as present with the placement of each needle, the feeling of each pulse, always being in touch with that final result, regardless of how incremental the treatment might be. And I have to say, I am attached to outcomes. I mean, so I mean, Aurobindo tells us we cultivate virtue for the sake of virtue, and when we're cultivating virtue, the only thing we have a right to insist on is our own integrity. But it is certainly my goal to end suffering and to free people. I just can't be attached to the form of it. And those of us who practiced 20, 30, 40 years know that we've had people storm out of our office when we communicated something with a pure intention, leave nasty messages on the answering machine, and call back and apologize 27 years later and said it was exactly what I needed to hear. I just wasn't ready to hear it yet. So I've come to have a consummate faith in a pure intention. It can just take decades to play out.
So this is echoed in I think it's Ling Shu chapter 8, that when the heart applies itself, we speak of intent. And that's the musculature. And I have to say that there's no possible way to know that 27 years later, any spoken word is any way directly related to the opening that person had. There's no way to know what intervened in that moment. There's no way, unless, there is absolutely no way to follow that. And the only way that the heart can apply itself is through its constant burning into emptiness, and that's infused into the moment, so that, as you said, the needling the placement of the needle vis-a-vis like Ling Shu chapter 1, the placement of the needle is the exhaustion of the intention. It is the manifestation itself of the intention in utter perfect conflagration with nothing left behind. And that if that's enacted with true integrity, if that's truly enacted with integrity, the response, the impact cannot be divorced from the intention. A true intention, an acausal intention, cannot be divorced from the impact. And I think that it's very important to remember that. And where our impacts are off, where our impacts are failing, not to be attached to the outcome is one thing. And that's okay. To recognize that we do often fail in the full manifestation of our intention. But it's imperative to me that how can the heart be the Lord and the Empress and the sovereign and have both Jun and Ju in its expression and not actualize itself perfectly when it is realized, leaving no room behind for shadow and trailings from behind.
That was so exquisite, Brandt. I loved what you said about the needle, and the intention is exhausted in that moment. It's like, and I also was very aware as you were speaking of the character, Earth being at the center, and Chung, that the arrow must hit the target perfectly. And I'm also in my own being, like, I love what you're saying, and it's as if that's to imagine into that kind of integrity where my intention and outcome cannot be separate. Like, I deeply appreciate you putting that forth as a possibility. And as in my experience, as I would say, as an aging woman, as a mother who's given birth, as a grandmother, to see how, and this is the thing, that as the heart extends itself and that muscularity extends and brings down the formless into form, to me, then there's the whole question of what happens at the poso level, at the level of the, these places, like you said, of the shadow, of the uncertainties that are also part of our lived experience, both as humans and as practitioners. So in that way, it's almost like I'm holding both Randine's, the wisdom that says, what my intention can do is keep bringing me back to the cushion, keep bringing me back to the garden, keep bringing me back to this really difficult patient who seems like they're, so resistant to change. And yet I keep coming back. As Lonny said, I keep coming back. But the outcome, see, for me, the outcome is not somehow in my personhood. The outcome belongs to the mystery.
I can't agree with that statement more.
Okay, good.
I'm not saying that it's arising from within you. Far from it. Exactly the opposite.
Right.
How can we speak of this quality of heaven within us in its endless creative endless creative manifestation? How can we speak of that as something that's arising within us?
Right.
even as it is present within us as the organizing principle for our being. That doesn't, I don't think that, I hope that I hope that I am not understood to be saying that arises from through our rectitude. Somehow we enact that, because that would be the same thing as the intention that is an expression of will,
Yeah.
as
Thank
it's understood in the Western sense, which is completely different from the will as it's understood in the Chinese sense.
Love that. Yes. So good. So I feel like yes, wonderful. Because that arising of the will from where it's truly arising from is still within mystery. Yes.
Ineffable.
Yeah. Good.
Well, it reminds me of the notion of music, and there can be a cognitive linguistic dimension of sound where I have intentions that I'm aware of. I'm telling myself what my intention is. But I'm also drawn to something that came up as Lonny was speaking around, the deepest intention may not be a cognitive linguistic dimension primarily. It's a form of music, a resonance of being that's holding some degree of an anchor around what I stand for. And maybe I have language around what I stand for. I can say, oh, I stand for truth, beauty, and goodness, or I stand for integrity, or any number of things. But that taking a stand, what do I stand for as I'm speaking? It may or may not match the words that I'm saying. It may be a different kind of music entirely. And sometimes it is. And so what comes up for me is this question around, and I'm wanting to invite the listeners into this question too. What do I ultimately stand for? What is like the deep intention that I'm holding? And how do I know when I'm holding it? Because I may be thinking about it. I have ideas about it, but how do I know when I'm holding it? What does that feel like in my heart as music? What does that feel like as it ripples through the field? And then there how do I know, and what is the impact? Can we separate, as Brandt was inviting, can we separate the music from the dancer? We don't know how the dancer is going to dance, but as soon as there's music, there's relationship to music, even if I'm standing stiff and resistant to dancing.
That centerpiece of the sound resonates and has no attachment to the outcomes. Yet at the same time, intention has structure, intention pushing forward in time and over time. And it is through that process, as a Saturnine process of earth and becoming and being and accepting that which is, and such that the intention becomes ultimately the process of releasing the intention, of not possessing an intention, that the ultimate freedom comes from not being bound by such a projection into space and time. And that level of freedom, of course, is a transcendent state to this whole experience. I walk into the treatment room and I want to know what my client's intention is, and how do I fit with that? Who am I within that world? And are my intentions of spiritual, complete liberational worldview coming to play in the context of their intentionality? Or my intentionality as I pray that only people who I'm able to help come into the presence of that conversation and engage in that destiny. And so for me, ultimately, it's an aspiration, the intention to release intention. That paradox is the world of being which is taking place currently.
I think I'd like to say something about what you just said about the intention of the intention. I'm getting lost here.
Yes. Yeah.
I feel there's a resonance between the patient and the practitioner, and it's like a bowl and something is arising, and there's a field which is set forth from the heart of the practitioner, and the patient might have an intention for themselves, and one might have taken the pulse, etc., and one might have a I don't want to say deeper, a greater, broader field of intention, and one uses a needle to handle that. I guess in simple words, if I'm trying to say is I might have some sort of intention that I'm setting forth, and very often I'm surprised that the intention of the patient manifests when I wasn't actually treating it directly. And I think that sort of encompasses what you said, but I can't quote back what you said. That their intention to have a pain-free hip or something miraculously arises when my intention might have been a little broader or more in some other realm. I do feel that I'm detached to the outcome in that sense, because I feel like my brain is limited. So what I perceive is limited, and the outcome is often greater, far greater. I'm always surprised that something happened in the realm of intention, but in the realm of the patient's perception of that intention. I don't know if that's making sense. So they're linked in time and space. They're linked. I mean, the outcome and the intention are linked, but they're not. But they can be linked even if I'm detached from it, because I do feel like I'm detached from. I like to be detached, because I feel like if I'm attached, I'm holding it in a certain shape, and I want to be free from that, and I want to free them to shape it however it's going to come. And like I said, my mind is limited, and the mind of heaven it has some broader intention that can be fulfilled. I think I get lost a little bit in these words, but hopefully somebody understands what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that was very good. When we get to this point there, and we're speaking paradox, and it's really like speaking out of the finite and the infinite simultaneously. And it seems like there's, in this internal quiet, when I'm free of desires and the heart applies itself, there's no room for me to really stand on any particular thing. The only thing that I'm standing on is my very beingness, that which comes from heaven, that which is coming through me, that which has the resonance. And so I'm emptied of self, and I couldn't be any more myself in that moment. And then what comes through carries that ring, that resonance, that yes, it's coming through me, but it's not from my finitude. Mm-hmm. And then whatever happens has that magical quality when you just like, wow. the mystery speaks in such a powerful way. And you know that you are an integral part of it. But it's because I was here that that happened. But it also seemed like I kind of wasn't. It didn't have any application where I'm, pulling these things out that I learned and that I knew. That's out of the field altogether. And that's total surrender. And then I'm most a tool of healing.
Yeah, what comes up for me as you're speaking, Randine, is a coming together of, well, I'll say it this way. What happens if the practitioner can enter with no self from a place of empty holding? Then there's maybe a different orientation to where intentionality is coming from. And maybe intentionality, we can talk about it as what's my intention as a practitioner and what's my patient's intention, and we can have that, and we've been illuminating some of that. But then there's also this intersubjective dynamic. There's a group of at least two that are joining together, and there are certain intentions that are maybe existing at certain conscious dimensions. But maybe there's a larger conversation about where are we going as people? Where are we going as humanity? Where are we going as the whole? That has a lot more question marks and a lot more surprises. And so as I'm listening to you, it brings me into a place of what's it like to have the ground of no self be the ground, so that there's some sort of intentionality that I can witness forming in a togethering process that may have, like, I want my hip, or I want, I've got a headache, like that there may be that there as like an entry point. But I also wonder about this sort of this togethering process where the intentionality is making itself known in a way that's surprising and previously unknown, as different from my intention is to anchor in good and integrity, which I do. But if I'm no self, if I disappear, somehow that remains. It doesn't disappear into like something else. Somehow it's there, but I'm no longer holding it. And I'm no longer there, but we are here. And so, ...
Yeah, I think one of the deep grounds of intention is to listen to what's present and to what's emerging, to listen to what's new, to, on the face of it, when a patient comes in and I would do my 1.5 or 2 hour intake, part of that is about establishing a shared intention together. But the question, so the mind has its intentions, rational intentions. But beyond that, as I said before, there's a deeper, and I think what you're alluding to, what I've heard Alexandra and what I've heard several people allude to, is really, there's a deep overall context of intentionality, but one of the deepest intentions is to be present to what's here, to drop everything for the sake of being present to what is emerging, what's here, what is this, and then investigating that together and going somewhere in a deep shared intention together that's emergent, that we're both discovering together. And so I always let patients know in the first session, this is not something I'm doing to you. We are in this together. We're on a journey together, and we're making agreements, and we're beholden to each other in a relationship here. And like any relationship, it's developmental, and to just be deeply, deeply interested in what is emerging. And this is, as you were saying, Alexandra, in the treatment room, we can sense this intersubjective field. And it emerges to the degree I have found that I'm really letting go of agendas and expectations and quite interested in, I have my intentions why I'm doing this needle, why I'm giving this herb, where the patient should get over 2 weeks or 2 months, or so all that's there. But I'm also just very interested because as soon as I put the first needle in, it's not the same patient who I set those intentions with anymore. So I have to be opening and listening because the patient, I and the patient and the field between us are developmental. And as soon as the first action's taken, as soon as the first word said, we're on a journey and it's always new. And there's something in that that is actually quite refreshing to people and is pretty radical and is medicine itself.
That's beautiful. Like, you can't step in the same corporeal river twice.
Right. Heraclitus.
And then everything that occurs becomes part of that total moment of emergence. And as you were saying, it's about surrendering to and listening to that and following it and feeling it. The field is the field that we're speaking of is like a sensation.
Yes.
Mutual field of resonance. And that resonance shifts the moment the needle's inserted and we perceive what we perceive as that shifted field in ourselves and in the other.
But then it sounds like what we're really talking about is intentioning. It's not so much an intention as a verb, as a noun, but it's intentioning. It's a telonic
Yes.
an unfolding where it's not like what is my intention. It's a quality of resonance of being and becoming that's in perpetual flowing and unfolding, and we're privy to that. We're awakening with that together.
And what's so it's not just merging with, but it's merging with as a foundation for actually co-creating with, getting in the driver's seat together in this intersubjective and going somewhere together, not just becoming one with and being carried down the river willy-nilly by the currents, but part of the intention itself. It's both the form and the flow in the river as well as the container of the river itself simultaneously.
That really feels like it's beginning to get close into what's emergent here. Because when I sit with, how does it actually feel when I'm in there with a patient, right? First of all, that when I insert the needle, of course, the intention it is Chung. It is that needle, there is no doubt, it must. And if I don't go in with that, like, it is going into the center, it is hitting the target. That, of course, is the archery practice that we do year after year after year, so that and in that sense, Brandt, my lived experience is that it must hit the target. We are with that clarity of intention. But when the intention is exhausted in the meeting of the point, that's where you know, the infinite possibilities are there, because who that patient becomes then, there are many, many ways that that could go. But I would say that for me, when I sit with them, what am I actually looking for there? It is flow. It is that it's movement. It is that those infinite possibilities become possible. We don't know which one it will be. And so in order to do this, because I'm really sitting with how does it feel in there when you're with the patient and you insert the needle and the flow happens, then I come back, Alexandra, to your question, what are we standing on if everything's moving? And what starts to come to me through this conversation is that, because I also, like Lonnie, was thinking, well, what's the difference between intention and will? You know, and that, of course, for me, it's like the intention rests, it rests on will, but not my will. That's where I think what I'm getting as we're talking is that the intention rests on will, and I stand on the will, but it's not my will. The only way it's going to work is if that will has become Tao, has become, you know, the one who flows the river, which of course isn't, you know, that's where we stand. That's what we stand on with this. So that's what's kind of sitting with how that feels in the treatment room.
Well, you put the needle in and there's the dachi, which when you were talking, Lorie, it just came into my awareness that the dachi is sort of the being saying, I've heard you. But then we have to be completely open to what happens, because this is an autopoetic system. And we've introduced a very small signal. And the dachi is, yes, message received, I hear you. But then we have to be really open. Our intention at that point can't limit us to just looking to an outcome limited by the intention. Then we have to drop everything and see, who is this person now? What is this? And then it's really, then it's alive, and then we're changing and the patient's changing, and we're in you know, there aren't two individuals in the room. There's the intersubjective field, and there's souls traveling together whose root is union. And that's the source of the flow.
And then I would say the autopoiesis becomes sympoiesis, right? We're
Yes.
inhabiting this space of becoming. Mm.
And there's a continual recursion of awareness to the shift in that field. I put the needle in and take the pulse, and where is it now? Who are the spirits inhabiting this blood now? What are the ancestors that are coming in through the blood? There's so many fields of intention that can come to play in a room at a given moment of interaction that may well exceed the individuals, the perceived individuals present. And coming to terms with those is oftentimes the basis of the healing, far beyond the field of stated intentions at the beginning of a session. And so each time that moment of heaven coming through and engaging into the center of the space, a set of responses comes up around that, and I have to do the recursive assessment to be able to see what those responses were. And just like you said, Lonnie, there has to be a complete openness. It's free of the projection of intention, as it were.
For me, it's like sometimes, you know, it's like there's that quality of resonance that I'm feeling inside of this location.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the putting in of the needle, it's like if a star was encased within like a walnut shell, and there's like the needle goes through that walnut shell, and then all of a sudden that star that inside the quote unquote inside the patient is no different than the quality of being that was inside of me. And there's something there around, as each of us as practitioners create our own unique relationship to, you know, what is heart chi, what is kidney yang, what are these qualities of being that we care about, beyond what books say, but we find these things inside of ourselves. So for example, practically speaking, if I'm with a client who is, let's say, kidney yang deficient, their will has become cold and droopy. There may be a way in which I might find the vigor and power inside my bones. And as I needle through the point, I'm finding the same quality of vigor in the intersubjective spaces inside the location that the patient is occupying. And in that, we then are one dimension of the cosmos. We are the forces of vigor, of uprightness, of strengthening and capacity. And then there's a rippling. It's like a jump start, but it's not me jump starting the client. It's something else. I don't know how to say what it is, but it's saying yes to a quality that's needed, that somehow is invited through the practitioner's own relationship to the subtleties in experience. And Chinese medicine, in all its ways of differentiation, is like this huge field of invitation into distinction. How this herb is slightly different than that herb, and this point is just a little different than that point. And it's all these entryways into, you could say, different stars in the cosmos, or different qualities of intentionality in the cosmos, that gives us this access to when a patient is droopy or getting a headache because their fierceness is blowing up into their head. That there are these different intentionalities of being that we can kind of become together.
I'm aware as we're talking, I have this sense of all of the hundreds and hundreds of people that we've, I kind of feel all these hundreds and hundreds. And I mean, among the seven of us, it's the thousands of people that we have touched in this way, that as we're talking. And so if you think of it in that way, like what is our real intention here? If we think of these thousands of points, And it does feel, when I sit with it that way, like the intention really, like, why do we keep doing this? What is the calling to keep doing this? And it is as if there's a kind of calling forth or an invitation. And I love, Alexander, what you're saying, that we're calling forth these stars, these thousands and thousands of bits of starlight, to bring some kind of a radiance, of a healing in a much larger way than just, as Vansanthi, you say, that one patient, not that one patient with the hip pain, is part of this much larger intention that I feel kind of circling around in our conversation here.
It just strikes me that, I've worked very hard in my life focusing intention, right? Through martial arts, through Qigong, through meditation, through cultivation, for 50 years, really focusing intention. And I think that's all to the good, but then it has to be acknowledged that what we're putting the needle into is a mystery. And at the heart of it, there's a mystery. And I think our capacity, because it's not either or, I think these are two faces of the same one thing, and the capacity to hold a strong attention while being completely open and unlimited by it, that in itself is a very, very powerful medicine, because many or most of our patients come to us knowing what has happened to them, knowing what it meant, knowing who they think they are, knowing what they think their intentions are in coming into treatment. And to the degree we realize we're putting a needle in mystery and can really hold that and bring them into the question of, who am I? What really was the significance of what happened? How else can I possibly think about it? And to be free of our intentions can be the root of helping them let go. Because, intention is associated with the earth, but so is thought. They can be deeply rooted together, right? Thought is the another way of translating, right? Yi. And people have so many thoughts about what happened, what it meant, about who I am based on my past. And I just think there's something very beautiful and sacred about listening from the mystery, relating to the patient as, I hear everything you're saying, and let's find out who you are. Let's find out how we are. Let's find out where this is going to go together. And in that, I think there's a very deep liberation of not knowing, but of being very interested. And I understand interest as Shen. Shen is interest. Shen, I would translate I am most inclined to translate Shen practically how it manifests in human beings as interest in what we don't know, in where we haven't been.
I'll be changing the subject again, but going back to the musical note, I feel a little like the song within my heart at that point in time is almost igniting the song within that person at that time. as that feel of resonance that's from a musical sort of vibratory kind of thing.
Well, this is what I was saying, right? I mean, it's not tangential.
No.
to what
Okay.
I was saying in the practitioner not knowing, that can awaken the patient.
Yes.
Not knowing and being more free around this whole sort of miasm of thought, feeling, emotion, sensation that they're fixated on with their intention, and just to be interested in who I am beyond that. Which is what I understand you're saying in terms of the song, metaphorically.
Yes, something like that. I think I just want to add, it's freeing me to sing my song at that moment, that integrity of who I really am. I'm describing it as my song, allows them to express themselves. So it's my flow, their flow, enhanced. If going against the flow is the only pathology, as Brandt has indoctrinated into me, that comment, but you know, the flow. Mm-hmm.
Somehow, a question.
Hey, Will,
Yes,
you have
Is
to
it-
lean closer.
have to be in closer. How's that?
Just because of your volume. We
Yeah.
couldn't hear you.
Okay.
Now you're perfect.
Let's see. It looks like my volume's up. So what is this process of discovery? What is the intention? Who's having the intention? How does the intention get served? And those questions, I suppose, have to be answered before I can enter with my own worldview of what intention is and how it's to be engaged and towards what end. And if there's to be such an end or objective that can be, say, measured in some sense. And so oftentimes the client doesn't know what the intention is. And it's that process of them coming to a point of understanding what they're doing with their life, who they are, why they're here. When they can come to that point of discovery about it, then, but far be it from me to say what that is. My job, I feel, is always to somehow create a space. My intention is to create space for them to unfurl their intentions into that space and into the world. And then at that point, then once that's happened, then I understand better how to relate to this individual in that quest, no matter how simple or mundane.
They unfurl their intention into the space. It's as if we simply stitch our own questioning into theirs. And then it's allowed, their question is allowed to emerge as some new intention that's yet emergent, that begs for more questions, that begs for only don't know, and that can only be followed.
Good, Brandt. Yeah.
As I'm listening to everyone, and I'm really sitting with this question of like, what is what has been my intention over 40 years of practice? Like what? Because I really do agree with you, Lonnie, when I hear you say, that there is this way that we are working to develop the capacity to have a sort of effectiveness, like an intention that has impact, that has muscularity. I mean, there's no doubt that that's a piece of it. And I love this idea of unfurling and flow, because honestly, as I'm sitting with and listening to you all, the pleasure, I have to say that I feel like that there's an aspect of my intention all these years has been to experience the pleasure of the flow, the pleasure of the unfurling. It's like, well, it's why I love watercolor, because the pleasure, my intention is to drop the paint on the wet paper. And then I get this tremendous pleasure from watching it unfurl. And I actually feel like, as I'm listening to everyone and sitting in this space, and of course, it's the same with the intersubjective space, the pleasure of being with you all in this conversation is watching the unfurling. We drop this question into the field of our thousands of patients and years of experience in this pool, and then there's an unfurling. So for me, and this is just coming out of our conversation, like what my intention is there's a certain element of going towards delight, going towards the pleasure of it, knowing full well that there's also this mystery that can completely, disrupt or interrupt. And that even that in some way has to become welcome or, part of this flow. That the intention opens.
Yeah, it's such an exciting way of seeing intention in a new way. Like I was always thinking of it as a certain form of tension, the applying itself, the totality of this is my intention. But when we bring up the idea that the intention is an invitation, that this emergence, this unfurling, this, universe of possibilities that can come from that intention, where I think the intention is one thing, and I take it into the field and it becomes something totally different, where I'm part of the mystery. I'm just watching that flow. I'm not only watching it, I am a part of it. But that tensioning creates the invitation for all possibilities. And there is a delight with it, because we can all feel it here, that we can feel the emergence of a new way of holding intention, where like all of a sudden my heart applying itself is just kind of blown open a little bit. So it's almost like beyond intention is the true intention.
Yes, because what we're coming into relationship with is the mystery, like all of it. That's, and because of course we keep coming back to that moment when we get the message, yes, the message is received, or, for me, it's like the drop of pigment meets the water, you know, and then the unfurling, the opening, we can't know the possibilities. There might be certain things we can predict through because we've had experience with, you know, how chi moves, or the paper, or the kind of paper that I'm using, or the kind of person, the constitution. But still, it's the excitement. And honestly, as you say, Randine, knowing that the intention is actually to enter into the mystery, you know, with both ourselves and with another person, with the patient.
Yeah, and I think, again, I think the mind can have many different intentions, but I think the intention of the soul is to be met, to feel met. And the intention of spirit is union. And I think this is universal. And I know, for instance, my intention in bringing this collective together, when I first talked to you about it a few years ago, Lorie, was to assemble a group of people who were capable of intersubjective dialogue where I would feel met. And I think we all feel met. And then in that feeling met, we recognize a oneness, we recognize a union, a ground of spirit. Beyond all the mind's different intentions. And there's just, but in doing this, we can put out a question, and then I don't know what's going to come out of Brandt's mouth. All bets are off, and nobody knows we don't know what's going to be said next. And so when Brandt was talking, like after I said something, and he said, "There's no way you can know after," I actually didn't know what he was talking about or how it related at all to actually what I had said. But rather than going with my mind's reaction to, is he actually critiquing something I said, just to totally drop it and go with the flow of the whole thing, assuming good intention and being open and listening beyond any defensiveness at all, and then hearing what the next person said, and then all of a sudden 4 or 5 people later, all of a sudden, I don't know how we got there, but we're in something. And there's a shared intention to that, because we're all here, I think, to be met and to meet the mystery deeper and deeper and deeper in a way that we can't just do on our own, meditating in a room. We need each other for that, because this is a living practice, an active practice, and there's an intention behind it, which is the goodwill and the openness and the interest, which are all manifestations of spirit. And then the listening. I think more and more I experience that one of the deepest manifestations of love is listening. And that opens the heart. And then this flower begins to flourish, which is beautiful. But it's not something that was built from a schematic. It's something alive, that we're not separate from it. I mean, we're part and parcel of the whole thing, and we're not just merging with a pre-existing thing. Something is birthing. It's like a perfectly clear pond, and you don't just want to toss a rock in just yet.
stepping into something dark and not putting on a light so that your eyes become accustomed to the darkness and you can go deeper into the mystery of the dark.
Yeah, and a very deep interest in intuiting at the limit of resolution of the forms just beyond the mind's intuition, but immanent in that mystery.
Yes, it's like we're swimming in Shuen.
Immanent in the mystery. Immanent in the mystery.
Yeah. And then, yeah, and then I'm just struck by deeper, then my experience right now is, oh, here I am. But it's not here, it's here. Well, if we were doing this just for us, I'd sit for an hour or two. But because we have an audience, I feel obligated. Because I don't think anybody wants to just see the seven of us staring out through Zoom on
Well,
YouTube.
That's been coming up for me too, to invite the listeners to make contact with why none of us can find anything to say anymore. Because to me this is getting into the underneath of things, and into, like, when I'm talking about sticking needles through walnuts into stars, I'm not speaking symbolically. I'm using symbolic language to speak about something. And so the invitation, I feel compelled to invite the listeners to lean in with us. This is not a moment to, like, oh, I guess they're done. This is the juice.
This is when we really get started.
And we dropped into a well of depth that feels to me like what comes before the blooming. And so none of us have anything to say, because we're falling into the quality of the mystery part, which is something to lean into. And so I want to just invite everyone, unless you're driving or something like that, to sense into what we're becoming speechless around. Because that, to me, is something altogether more important, related to what's happening in the treatment room.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, it feels so prior to thought, where there's a presencing that's shared, that, like, it's not my presence, which I can tap into at any old time, but it's this when we're all here together prior to thought presencing together in this field, there's such a visceral quality to it that's a little bit intoxicating. That flow through the heart, where, like Lonny said, that this is me. Like this is a different me than the one that got on this call. That this is a shared me, and this shared me is so much vaster and so much more mysterious and says so much more than the this me. So I hope you can all feel that, that shared presence.
Feel in a way like we're sort of circling around that moment. We're kind of creating a little bit of a cocooning around it now. That's the image that comes to me. It's like now it's a different moment. And in this moment, that moment of being together in Shwen, in that mystery where it all emerges from. And I'm talking about it now, so it's different, but it's still present. Like it's still here, but I feel almost like we're creating a cocoon around it as we move towards closing. That, we'll all hold in our hearts until next time.
Well, it's of profound intimacy.
But I want to share something, and it's a little bit departing from the immediacy of intersubjectivity, but I'm called to share it because it is present for me. And Lonny, I think you sort of intimated it. At the beginning, when we began, we were separate. Like I'm tracking this, and I know I'm going backwards, but this is present to me as a whole, that at the beginning we came in and there was a sense of one person had one and one another, and there was a little bit in me that was like, oh no, we're in a disagreement. What if we start fighting with each other about this philosophical idea? But what I wanted to say, and the reason I'm bringing it up, is because it was so incredible to watch, and as an opportunity to say how these perspectives that come in, if we actually do this, if our intention is to hold or open to the emergent, that it's okay. Like we came in that way. And then because, as you say, Lonny, our intention and our intention and commitment is to seeing each other as in our highest, in regarding each other with love and will to become together. It was like the perspectives began to dance and move and prism themselves into where we got to. And that I just needed to honor.
Well, it's creative friction, evolutionary friction.
And my sense, and my sense is that if we did this perfectly, it would be a disservice, because my understanding is that one of the intentions of this is to invite people that have been in practice for quite a long time and have a bunch of things they could go on and on about, to model something different for the community. And I think one important thing about doing that is to be able to do it imperfectly, so that we can see contrast, so that there's the content of what we're exploring together and the way we're trying to explore it together, but then for listeners to be able to say, oh, I was able to track that too, you guys. I was able to notice how differently it felt in the beginning, and then those moments when all of a sudden, the certain qualities of smiles and the disposition, the soaking of the full beingness that I'm observing with each of you. Like, oh, now everyone seems like there's a saturation happening, whereas it didn't feel like that in the beginning. That I want that transparency to be something for all of us to see, because that way we can all, meaning beyond what we're doing as a 7 on Zoom, but for everyone that's interested in this kind of conversation, to be able to witness sort of different dimensions of it. And those dimensions have to include not doing it, so that we can differentiate and to then find our way. How did we find our way into it? We could have taken another direction and not found our way into it, but that's not what happened. And how come? I think all that's really interesting to me
because of the shared intention.
Because of the shared intention and the listening.
Yes.
Right.
And indeed, we did dip our toes into the mystery and into the sacred. And that process of getting there was entertaining and entrancing. And as we entered, it became further and further more entrancing. And so that precious moment of dipping the toes into the mystery of the sacred was really well worth cocooning, Lorie, and sustaining.
Well, I'd like to also just make the point that a characteristic is that we're talking and interacting with each other creatively with our eyes open over the internet, entering a profound meditative field. It's a very, very strong field. And it's a meditative current in which we're all sharing and with our eyes open while interacting. And in my experience, it's just a mirror image of meditation. Meditation is being, this is becoming together. And being and becoming, form and formlessness as one. And so this is like meditation, really, from the perspective of integrality, a root practice, which is being together in that ever-present origin as one, transparently, as vehicles for that luminosity, radiating through the eyes, through the heart, through the mind, in real time together in a creative process. And it's okay that there's friction. It's okay there are disagreements. It's okay there are different points of view, and it's okay that at times people are speaking and I actually don't know what they're talking about. Because there's a very deep fundamental trust in the direction of the process.
Well, that's right. And we need that because because to me, this isn't just about Chinese medicine or just about us or the people that are listening. It's about a possibility in culture. And there's a lot of times that I don't understand what someone's talking about, even if what they're saying is in simple words. It's like in this dynamic, there's a lot of complexity and nuance and dynamics and years and years of history flowing into something. But I think there's a lot of ways in which in culture, we don't know what the hell each other's talking about. And what's exciting for me is that there's a modeling of a possibility for how we might keep our eyes open, not know what the hell each other's are talking about, maybe even completely disagree, and then still be co-creating, or somehow being in relationship with this profound mystery. I mean, wow.
So I think our time is up. Believe it or not, that was an hour and a half. And just like in meditation, you sit, and when you're really meditating, you go, what, 5 hours already? And so on behalf of all of us, we'd like to thank all our viewers and listeners, and we invite comments. in the comment section to engage with us, and we'll do a few more of these, and soon enough, I think we'll get to both inviting guests and possibly inviting the profession to come in real time and listen to us, participate live with this. So we'll see what forms it takes. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well done, everybody. Beautiful
Thank
to see you all.
Mm.
Good night.
Bye.
Yeah.